Hey Tile Titans, thanks for tuning in to Tile the World. I'm Andy and this is Ivy. Let's get tiling. You're looking for the secrets to pro-level tile mitering, and we've got a stack of expert advice to share. Turns out, there's more to this than a 45-degree angle. We've got tips on avoiding chipped edges, why hand cutting might be better than a saw, and even how much pros charge for this skill.
It's fascinating how much debate there is around mitering, even among experienced tilers,
Yeah.
We've got sources ranging from YouTube tutorials and forum discussions to articles by industry experts, and everybody seems to have their own tricks and opinions. So today we're going to synthesize all that information and give you the key takeaways to help you up your mitering game.
Okay, let's unpack this. One of the first things that jumped out at me was this back and forth about using a wet saw versus a grinder. You'd think a saw would be the go-to for precision, but a lot of sources actually recommend a grinder, especially for delicate tiles. Why is that?
It seems counterintuitive, but a grinder with a diamond blade can give you more control and actually minimize chipping. Think of it like this. A saw blade tends to have a wider cutting path and can deflect slightly, which can be disastrous when you're aiming for those super precise miters. A grinder, on the other hand, allows for more subtle adjustments and a final cut.
So it's about finesse, not brute force. That makes sense. One expert even compared it to sculpting rather than sawing.
Exactly. And speaking of finesse, several sources highlighted the importance of prepping the tile before you even make the cut. One YouTuber, Nathan Merrill, stresses the importance of using a variable speed buffer with a 200 grit pad to smooth out any imperfections on the edges before cutting.
That seems like a small detail, but I guess those little things add up.
They absolutely do. Think about it. A rough edge can lead to chipping during the cut, no matter how careful you are. By smoothing it out beforehand, you're creating a clean, consistent surface that's less likely to crumble.
It's like prepping a canvas before you paint. You need a smooth foundation to create a masterpiece. Another tip that came up repeatedly was about avoiding that plunge cut. Going all the way through the tile in one go.
Right, that can be a recipe for disaster, especially with brittle tiles. Instead, a lot of pros recommend leaving a small lip on the first pass and then using the grinder to carefully refine the miter. It's a two-step process that gives you more control and helps prevent those dreaded chips.
Want tile action? Check out Craig's YouTube channel, Tile the World. He's a tile guru. Okay, back to mitering. Now, many sources emphasize the importance of preserving the factory edge when you're creating your miter. What exactly is the factory edge and why is it so important?
The factory edge is basically the smooth, polished edge that the tile comes with straight from the manufacturer. It's often more consistent and less prone to chipping than a cut edge, which is why it's so desirable to preserve at least a sliver of it when you're mitering.
Makes sense. But one forum user pointed out that sometimes the tile's base color doesn't match the surface color, which can become an issue if you grind down too far and expose that base.
That's a great point, and highlights why testing your cuts on a scrap piece is crucial. It allows you to see how much of that factory edge you can safely remove without compromising the aesthetic. It's like a dress rehearsal for your tile.
Okay, now for the million-dollar question. The angle. Is it always a strict 45 degrees, or is there some wiggle room?
While 45 degrees is the theoretical ideal for a perfect miter, the reality is that it often needs to be adjusted depending on the project. For example, if you're mitering a shower niche, you might need a slightly steeper angle to accommodate the slope of the shower floor.
And one source even recommended intentionally cutting a slightly steeper angle to give yourself more play when fitting the pieces together.
Exactly. It's all about anticipating potential challenges and making subtle adjustments to ensure those miters come together flawlessly. It's a bit like tailoring a suit. You have to account for the curves and contours of the body, in this case, the walls and surfaces you're working with.
I like that analogy. It makes the whole process seem less intimidating. So we've got the angle, the cut, and now we need to think about what holds it all together, the adhesive. And there seems to be a clear consensus that grout is a no-go for mitered edges. Why is that?
Grout just doesn't have the flexibility and durability needed for those tight, angled joints. It tends to crack and crumble over time, which can ruin both the look and the structural integrity of your miter. Most experts recommend using either a color-matched epoxy or a silicone caulk specifically designed for tile.
I see. So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Absolutely. Epoxy and silicone are much more flexible and can withstand the movement and stress that those mitered edges experience. Plus, they provide a smooth, seamless finish that complements the precision of the cut.
And speaking of color matching, one commenter mentioned that you can find epoxy color kits at most granite suppliers. That's a great tip for those of us who want that seamless professional look.
It really is. A perfectly matched epoxy makes those mitered edges practically disappear, creating a clean, sophisticated look that elevates the entire tile installation.
Now, let's be realistic for a moment. One pro pointed out that mitering can be pre-labor intensive, which often translates into a higher price tag for clients.
That's true. Mitering requires a high level of skill and precision, and that expertise comes at a price. But the stunning results and the added value it brings to a project often make it worth the investment. It's a detail that discerning clients are willing to pay for.
One installer even shared his pricing for mitered shower walls, $35 per square foot. That's a pretty good indicator of how much value this skill adds.
It really is. It's a reminder that high-quality craftsmanship and attention to detail are valued, and clients who appreciate those things are willing to invest in them. And for those DIYers out there who might be feeling intimidated by mitering, remember that even the pros started somewhere. It takes practice and patience to master this technique, but the rewards are definitely worth the effort.
I like that encouraging message. And speaking of practice, one forum user suggested experimenting with different angles on scrap pieces before committing to a full cut on your actual tiles.
That's a great tip, especially if you're working on a project with unique angles or if you're trying to achieve a specific visual effect. By practicing on scraps, you can fine-tune your technique and get a feel for how different angles will impact the final look of your miter.
It's like doing a test run before the main event. Now, let's dive into some more advanced techniques that can really elevate your mitering skills. One that stood out to me was the idea of back mitering. Can you explain what that is and why it's beneficial?
Back mitering involves grinding a miter on the backside of the tile, which essentially creates a thicker edge for applying your epoxy or silicone. It might seem like an extra step, but it adds a lot of structural strength to those delicate corners, especially for thinner tiles that are prone to chipping.
So it's like reinforcing the miter from the inside out.
Exactly. It's a technique that's often used in high-end installations where those details really matter. Not only does it provide extra support, but it also gives you a larger surface area for the adhesive to bond to, creating a more durable and long-lasting joint.
That's a great point. And it makes sense that a stronger joint would be especially important in areas like shower niches or countertops that are exposed to moisture and wear and tear.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to grout joints for mitered edges, several sources recommend leaving a slightly wider gap than you would for standard tile installations.
What do you think that is? I'm guessing it has to do with imperfections in the cuts. Even with the best technique, it's probably impossible to get those miters absolutely perfect every time.
You're exactly right. A slightly wider grout joint gives you a little bit of wiggle room to accommodate any minor discrepancies in the angles. It creates a more forgiving and professional look, especially if your walls aren't perfectly straight.
It's like a little bit of insurance to ensure a smooth and visually appealing finish. Speaking of finishing touches, there are a lot of great tips about sanding those mitered edges to achieve that polished look.
Yes, sanding is crucial for refining the miter and removing any rough spots or imperfections. It's a multi-step process that involves starting with a coarser grit to shape and smooth the edge, then gradually moving to finer grits to polish it to perfection.
One expert recommended using a 50 or 60 grit grinding pad for the initial shaping, and then switching to a 200 grit polishing pad for the final touches.
Those are excellent starting points. Of course, the specific grits you choose will depend on the type of tile you're working with and the level of polish you're aiming for. The key is to be patient and methodical, gradually working your way up to that smooth, almost glassy finish.
And water plays a crucial role in the sanding process too, right?
Absolutely. Keeping the tile and the sanding pads wet helps prevent dust and ensures a smoother, more consistent finish. Water acts as a lubricant, reducing friction and heat, which can be especially important for delicate tiles. It also helps prevent the sanding pads from clogging up with tile dust.
It's amazing how many little details go into creating those flawless miters. Now let's address a common fear that many DIYers might have, dealing with chips. Even with the best technique, chips can happen, especially with certain types of tile.
Chips are definitely a reality of tile work, but there are ways to minimize their occurrence and even camouflage them if they do happen. One tip I came across was to score the tile with a grinder before making your cut.
That makes sense. By creating a deliberate weak point, you're basically controlling where the tile is most likely to break, rather than leaving it to chance.
Exactly. And scoring can be especially helpful for those brittle tiles that are prone to chipping. Another tip is to use a back-a board behind the tile while you're cutting.
That's a good point. A backer board provides extra support and prevents the tile from flexing, which can also lead to chipping.
Right. It's like having a steady hand to guide the cut. And even if you do end up with a few minor chips, don't despair. There's always the option of using a color-matched epoxy to fill them in.
It's like magic. A skilled tiler can make those chips practically disappear with a little bit of epoxy and some careful blending. Now, before we get into the safety aspects of mitering, I wanted to touch on a technique that's both practical and stylish. Using a pencil tile to finish the outside edge of a mitered corner.
Ah, yes, the pencil tile. It's a simple but effective way to add a touch of elegance and definition to your mitered edges. A pencil tile basically acts as a frame, creating a clean, finished look that complements the mitered corner.
One source even suggested using a contrasting color for the pencil tile to make a bolder design statement.
That's a great idea. It can add visual interest and a touch of personality to your tile installation. Think of it like adding a contrasting trim to a piece of clothing. It elevates the entire look.
Now, let's talk about safety. Mitering involves power tools and sharp edges, so it's crucial to take the necessary precautions to protect yourself.
Safety should always be your top priority. When you're working with tools like grinders and saws, eye protection is absolutely essential.
And gloves are a must too, to protect your hands from those sharp edges and from the vibrations of the tools.
And don't forget about a dust mask. Cutting and grinding tile creates a lot of fine dust that you don't want to be inhaling.
One source even recommended wearing ear protection, especially when using a grinder for extended periods.
That's excellent advice. Grinders can be quite noisy, and prolonged exposure can damage your hearing. And in addition to personal protective equipment, it's important to make sure your workspace is well ventilated to avoid inhaling dust and fumes.
A clean and organized workspace is also important for safety. You don't want to trip over tools or cords while you're working with sharp objects. Now, for those who are new to mitering, there was some great advice from a seasoned pro. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's such an important point. There's no shame in seeking guidance from someone who's more experienced. In fact, it's a smart way to learn new techniques and avoid costly mistakes. There are so many resources available too, like workshops and classes offered by tile suppliers and even some contractors.
Those are valuable resources for anyone who wants to improve their skills and gain confidence in their abilities. And of course, there's always the option of hiring a professional tiler for those projects that are beyond your comfort level or require a high level of expertise.
That's a wise decision for certain projects, especially if you're working with expensive materials or if the design is particularly intricate. A professional tiler has the experience and the tools to ensure a flawless installation that will add beauty and value to your home.
So as we wrap up this segment on advanced techniques and safety tips, let's remember that mitering is more than just about creating perfect cuts. It's about problem solving, adapting to the unique challenges of each project, and constantly honing your skills.
That's a great way to put it. Mitering requires a blend of technical skill, creativity, and a willingness to learn and experiment. It's a craft that rewards patience and attention to detail, and the results can truly transform a space.
All right, we're in the home stretch of our mitering deep dive. But before we wrap up, I want to shift gears and talk about the real-world implications of all this knowledge. We've covered techniques and tips, but how does mastering mitering translate into value both for the pros and for those DIY enthusiasts tackling their own projects?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of why mitering is such a sought-after skill. For professional tilers, mastering mitering can significantly boost their reputation and earning potential. Clients are willing to pay a premium for that level of craftsmanship, for those flawless corners and seamless edges.
It's like the difference between a basic suit and a tailored one. Both might technically fit, but the tailored suit just has that extra level of sophistication and polish.
Exactly. And clients who are investing in high-end tile installations, they're looking for that tailored look. They want to see that attention to detail, that commitment to quality. And when a tiler can deliver those perfectly mitered edges, it elevates the entire project and sets them apart from the competition.
It's a selling point, a differentiator. Remember that installer who mentioned charging $35 per square foot for mitered shower walls? That's a clear example of how this skill translates into real dollars.
It absolutely is. And it's not just about the labor involved. It's about the expertise, the artistry, the ability to transform a space with those meticulous details.
And what about for the DIYers out there? Where does mitering fit into their world?
For DIY enthusiasts, mitering can open up a whole new realm of possibilities. It allows them to tackle more challenging projects, achieve a professional level finish, and ultimately add value to their homes.
Whether it's a bathroom renovation, a kitchen backsplash, or even a fireplace surround, mitering can take those projects to the next level.
Absolutely. It's empowering to be able to execute those details yourself, to see your vision come to life with that level of precision. And even if you don't plan on mitering every single tile in your house, having a basic understanding of the process can help you communicate more effectively with contractors and make informed decisions about your renovation.
Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. Understanding the intricacies of tile mitering gives you a greater appreciation for the craft and helps you become a more informed consumer. You'll be able to recognize quality workmanship, ask the right questions, and ultimately make choices that align with your vision and budget.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question. We've talked extensively about mitering for shower niches, corners, those kinds of things. But where else could you use this technique to really make a statement, to wow a client or elevate your own DIY projects?
That's a fantastic question. It challenges us to think beyond the conventional applications of mitering. Could you use it to create intricate borders or accents, to frame a mirror or a piece of artwork, to craft decorative elements within a larger tile installation?
The possibilities are endless. It's all about pushing the boundaries of creativity and exploring new ways to incorporate this technique into your designs.
And that's the beauty of tile work in general, isn't it? It's a medium that allows for both precision and artistry, functionality and beauty. And mitering, with its blend of technical skill and creative potential, really embodies that spirit.
So to all our tile titans out there, keep those creative juices flowing, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to experiment. Who knows what amazing mitered masterpieces you'll create.
Remember, the journey of mastering any skill is filled with challenges and triumphs. Embrace the process, learn from your mistakes, and most importantly, have fun.
Thanks for listening. For more, check out Craig's Instagram, Tile Nerd Army. And for all you tile and stone needs, shop at tilebar.com. Until next time, keep tiling like the pros.